In the legal world, there is a combination of forces that feed a corrupt and suffocating legal system for attorneys. Law schools, law professionals, judges, and even the firms themselves for whom you work create a system, a matrix, if you will, that is nothing like what you thought when you passed the bar exam. The purpose of this podcast is to help you escape this legal matrix, leading you out of the proverbial desert to be free of the bondage of the matrix. Hosted by Bryce D. Nyer, attorney at law with over 30 years experience in the trenches of civil and criminal litigation at the state, federal, and international levels. He's a highly accomplished and resourceful legal professional, a true master of his craft, and he's here to help you get your life back. Here's your host, Bryce D. Nyer.
All right. This is Bryce D. Nyer coming at you live from Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of Fort Bragg for another episode of Escape the Legal Matrix. Tonight's topic, the legal case against Jesus. That's what we're going to talk about. Many times, but a couple times, my producer, Bryce Prescott, one of the greatest producers of podcasting and in social media, has told me, don't be such a Debbie Downer. Don't be so serious all the time. And I'm a pretty lighthearted guy. I have a great sense of humor. I do. I know, may not seem true, but it is true. But the reality is our world is burning to the ground. And the original mission of Escape the Legal Matrix, as I've said before in earlier podcasts, came to me in January of 2023 when I was in a breakout session of Wake Up Warrior. And during that session, in about 45 minutes, maybe, I think it was like 32, 45 minutes, something like that, I had outlined probably 100 chapters, topics for a book I'm working on called Escape the Legal Matrix. And at that point, the target, the impossible game, was to create litigators across the globe who operated in truth and focused on the four main domains of body, being, balance, and business. They would go out and just raise havoc and wage war against the legal matrix. Now, the reality is the legal matrix is the system that's in place across the globe, which basically silences people that seek to give the truth, to live in truth, to operate in truth. And it's happening more and more on a global scale and picking up at an unprecedented pace. And so here is what I have noticed for years, and especially within the last year, that we are now coming to this crossroads of delusion and deception, which is ongoing. And many people, they don't want to admit it, or they know it, or they have a feeling, but they just don't care. Or their hearts have grown so hardened that they just don't know the difference between lies and truth anymore, and good and evil. And so years ago, even as a little kid, when I began into this in-depth reading and research, especially about Revelation, I was always fascinated with it in Scripture. Because if you read Revelation, it talks about the end of this present world and the final judgment of mankind. It's pretty scary, depending upon who you are and where you're at. And it doesn't paint a pretty picture of the process that happens leading up to the final judgment. Now, saying that, I have noticed that the court system, because I've been a litigator for over 30 years, that the court system has been continually used as this legal matrix to be this vindictive vehicle for baseless vindictive litigation to silence people. It happens all the time. It's happening in the EU. It's clearly happening in the UK. And other countries around the world. It's just unbelievable the amount of not just prosecution, but persecution of Jews and Christians. And it's just, you can challenge that if you want, but the facts are the facts, and they are there. It's not based on emotion. The cases are there. I've seen the videos. I've seen the results, the reports. It's not fake. It's not made up. And I kept wondering what it is about God, and especially Jesus, that people tend to persecute and to prosecute. And because that's really, if you break it all down, that's really kind of where it's at. It's the case of good versus evil, of Jesus versus Satan. And I don't know, maybe some of you don't believe that God exists. Maybe you don't believe Jesus exists. Maybe you don't believe Satan exists. And I have that discussion often with certain folks. But you look at what is going on in the world, and you look at documents that can be verified and proven as to when they were written, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and that people like Herod and the historical Jesus clearly existed. That's not even a debate among scholars that may be agnostic or even atheist. That there are facts and writings from the 1st and 2nd and 3rd centuries which build upon each other and clearly establish that Jesus did exist, and that Pontius Pilate did exist, and that Caiaphas did exist, and just supports. And you get all of the excavations in the Middle East or around the world, just continually verifying what is in Scripture. Now, getting back to this issue in this case, it's like the world versus Jesus. And as I watch what's going on, I have come to no other conclusion that what is happening is that Jesus is real. He is who he said he was. He is who he says he is. And there has been no other person like Buddha or Muhammad or Confucius or Nostradamus. They never came back from the dead. Their bodies were clearly discoverable and clearly buried and did not disappear. And nobody really goes around bad-mouthing them per se or attacking them, because these particular individuals did not call out people for their sins. They did not talk about, really, as Jesus did, in an afterlife and the consequences and the accountability. None of them claimed to be the only path to salvation. They couldn't make that claim. And so as you dig deeper and dig deeper and dig deeper in this case of the world versus Jesus, you see even today that you mention his name and people flip a gasket. You can sit there and go out and scream Allah Akbar. You can talk about Muhammad all day long. You can talk about Confucius because it's kind of cool. You're the cool kids, you know? You belong to this cool club. And to me, it's a lot of deception and delusion. And people are drinking this Kool-Aid. And I began to wonder, okay, so even if you don't believe Jesus is a Messiah, if you go back and you read in Scripture what he said about feeding the poor, forgiveness of others, and the fact that it clearly appears in Scripture that he healed people. And I'm like, well, okay, what's wrong with that? What is their beef? And I'll tell you what the beef is in the world. Their problem is that we want to do what we want to do when we want to do it, no matter what, and we don't want any consequences for it. And when we're told that what we're doing is sinful and that it's wrong, then we feel like we are the ones that are persecuted, like people have some sort of phobia, and then the attacks begin. Well, here's the reality. You were born, and that's a fact. And if you're hearing this, you're alive, and that's a fact. And here's another fact. Death has a 100% win rate. You will not leave this earth alive. You will leave it in one form or another, and it will be through death. There have been very few, a handful, that left the earth alive and went to heaven, if you believe in Scripture. Very few. A handful. And so it begs the question of why there is this case going on around the world, this persecution and prosecution of the world against Jesus. I mean, think about it. In China, in North Korea, in the former Soviet Union, they would kill people. They would imprison them if they exercised religious freedom, and in particular for Christians, for those that followed Christ. Now think about that for a minute. What is it they're so afraid of? If he isn't who he said he is, if he wasn't who he said he was, then why were they so afraid? Why did they imprison people? Why did they execute them? Why did they kill them? Why? Because if they just believed, either they believed Jesus was a man, and if he was a man, by the time that a lot of these countries or kingdoms came to power, Jesus died in 33 AD. So why would North Korea today, China today, other countries imprison and kill people just because they preach about God and Jesus? Why is that? So it then circles back to they feel threatened. And what do they feel threatened about? What they feel threatened about is the fact that, hey, maybe he is who he says he is. And maybe God does exist. And they're in this state of rebellion. In fact, the majority of the world, a lot of us are in rebellion. I've been in rebellion because we didn't want to be held accountable and responsible for what we did, what we failed to do, or what we said, or what we failed to say. And perhaps these feelings that people are having inside, and I see this on social media all the time where people are talking about they feel empty, they feel void, they don't feel any joy, they don't feel connected to the world. Maybe that is your soul, and God's sending out the ping that, hey, it's about to get real. If you take a look, if you just stop, and even if you just take a look at what's going on around the world right now today, it's not good. And everybody wants to pretend that, this has all happened before. That's, the world's been in turmoil. But the case of the world versus God and world versus Jesus has never been at an all-time high as it is right now. And why? If you don't believe in God and you don't believe in Jesus, then what are you so afraid of? What is it when people say that we shouldn't steal, commit adultery, commit fornication? I mean, I've broken just about all the commandments. I mean, I'll be real. I mean, I have. I'm not sitting here trying to virtue signal, and it's not a good feeling. It's not a club you want to belong to. Not at all. And it just, as I'm sitting here this weekend in litigation, and I'm in litigation a lot, and I look around in the courtroom, whether it's criminal court, whether it's family court, whether it's juvenile court, whether it's the estates division, the courthouses are the evidence of what's going on in society, in the human race. And I would venture to say, I would take a wild guess, and I believe that I would be correct, that if people obeyed the 10 Commandments, all of us, including me, of course, and we kind of did what Jesus said to do, I think a lot of the courthouses would be empty. But the problem is that, again, we think we know best. And so the case of the world versus God and versus Jesus is ongoing. And so only one of a few things can be true. When we die, there's absolutely nothing, and we just go back to nothingness. Or when we die, Jesus and God are in fact real. There is an ultimate accountability. There is an ultimate final judgment. And in the end, there will be only one party that prevails. And so everybody has to make a choice in this life of whether they're the plaintiff, or they're the defendant, or they're the world, or they're with the defendant. We've all got to pick a side. It's game time. We're down at the 20. It's time to punt. It's time for all of us to make a choice. And again, I know, my producer Bryce Prescott always said, don't make this so heavy and everything. And I get it. He's a fun guy, smart. His podcast, they're fantastic. And he's a very wise guy. He has a lot of wisdom, smart, has a lot of life experience. But he too, just like me, one day, we will take our last breath. And then you know what? We're all going to know one way or the other. So it's something to think about. So ask the better question. Where are you? Which side of the dock are you on? Which table are you advocating from? Because I'm taking a good look at my life in this period of my life of discernment. And just take a look. Look at your world. Behold your world. And wonder why so many would prosecute and persecute those who follow somebody that in his day, when he walked the earth, talked about forgive your enemies, turn the other cheek, help the poor, help those that cannot help themselves, but be sincere about it. And yet, even today, the prosecution and the persecution continues. This is Bryce out.